A lonely widower found an Apache woman in the snow, fleeing from Montana Territory, January 1876. The storm had clawed at the mountains for 2 days straight. Winds screamed down from the Bitterroots, scouring the pine-covered ridges and blanketing the world in a merciless white. It was the kind of storm that buried things, footprints, memories, entire lives. Edgar Bellamy tightened his buffalo-hid coat as he trudged through the deepening snowdrifts. At 37, he was still strong in body, but loss had aged him in ways the mirror never showed. Since Maria passed, it had been just him and Smokey, his loyal sorrel gelding, living quietly above Elk River in a log cabin built for two, now echoing with silence and memories too stubborn to leave. Smokey had vanished the night before during the worst of the storm. Edgar had woken to an empty corral and tracks, half filled with snow leading west. It was foolish to go after the horse in this weather, but Smokey was more than just an animal. He was the last piece of his old life. The wind bit at his face as he followed the trail down the ravine. The hooves had drifted off course, weaving through pines toward the river. And then, something odd. Smaller prints, human, barefoot. Edgar stopped, stared. The tracks were delicate, light, and wrong. Too small for a man, too smooth for boots. He crouched, ran a gloved finger along the indentation. Who the hell walks barefoot in this storm? A shiver ran down his spine, and it had nothing to do with the cold. He followed the prints. They staggered through the snow, looping toward a patch of willow trees at the river bend, and there, half covered in a smooth mound of white, something broke the natural shape of the land. A lump, too even, too still. Edgar dropped to his knees and began brushing snow away. The top layer was soft, almost warm beneath his fingers. A tattered manta appeared first, woven in faded red and blue, the kind you only saw on the backs of tribespeople. Then a hand, small, brown, motionless. Jesus. He worked faster, a shoulder. A face, young, barely out of girlhood, raven hair clinging to cheeks drained of color. Her lips were blue, her eyelids fluttering like dying moth wings. Apache. He pressed his ear to her chest. A heartbeat, faint, but there. Without hesitation, he lifted her from the snow. She was light, too light, and cold enough to burn. He wrapped her in the manta, then in his coat, pressing her close to his chest. "Stay with me," he murmured. "Don't go yet." He whistled. Loud and sharp, the old whistle Smokey knew. For a moment only the wind answered. Then a soft nicker. The horse appeared between the trees, mane caked in frost, eyes wide with apology. "You damned fool," Edgar muttered. "We'll settle this later." He slung the girl across the saddle, mounted behind her, and wrapped his arms around both her and the saddle horn. Smokey turned, trudging carefully through the deep snow. The world was nothing but white and wind. Edgar leaned forward, shielding the girl from the storm with his body. She didn't move, didn't shiver, just lay limp in his arms like something already gone. The cabin rose like a ghost through the blizzard. Smoke barely curled from the chimney. Edgar dismounted and carried her to the door, which groaned in protest as he pushed it open. Inside, the air was cold, but not deadly. He set her down near the hearth, then rushed to stir the coals. The fire caught with a crack and a hiss. He threw on pine logs, breathing life into the flame. "Come on," he said, more to himself than her. "Come on, girl." He stripped off her wet clothes, careful, clinical. He fetched every blanket he owned, even the one that still smelled of Maria, and wrapped her tight. He brewed willow bark tea, fed it to her one slow sip at a time, tilting her head gently. Her skin stayed cold, but the gray in her lips faded slightly. He sat beside her, knees aching, breath shallow. "Stay with me," he whispered again. "Please." The fire danced shadows on the walls. Outside, the storm raged on. Inside, a man who had already buried one woman refused to let the snow take another. And in the silence between wind gusts, her breath hitched. Just once. But it was enough. The wind howled through the cracks in the cabin like a mourning ghost. The fire had burned low, casting long shadows that shifted across the wooden floor. Edgar dozed in the rocker, revolver within reach, his eyes half closed but never truly asleep. A scream shattered the stillness. High-pitched, raw, a language he did not understand but thick with terror. He bolted upright. The girl sat upright near the hearth, her eyes wide, hair clinging to her damp face, breath ragged. She screamed again, louder, the same word repeated over and over. Tja, Kurak, Kurak, Kurak! She thrashed beneath the blankets, clutching the woven manta like a shield. Hey now, hey, Edgar said, his voice low, steady. He raised both hands, palms open. You're safe. Nobody's gonna hurt you. She didn't understand him, that much was clear, but his tones slowed her panic. Her eyes flicked to him, wild and wary. Kurak! She whimpered one last time, then crumpled into sobs. Edgar moved slowly. He crouched near the hearth, not too close. He didn't reach for her, just sat with her in silence, while the fire crackled and the storm wailed outside. After some time, she quieted. You hungry? He asked, voice still gentle. She didn't respond, just stared, her body coiled like a spring. Edgar stood and moved to the kitchen. He took a can of venison stew from the shelf, opened it, and poured it into a small pot. As it warmed, he added dried herbs, yarrow and sage, then scooped a spoonful into a tin cup. When he offered it, she hesitated. He placed it near her, then backed away. She sniffed it cautiously, then took a sip. A minute passed, then another. She took another. By the time the cup was empty, the tears had stopped. Edgar let out a breath he didn't realize he was holding. You don't speak English, he murmured. Or, you don't trust me enough to try. She looked at him. Her face was unreadable, but when he pointed to himself and said, Edgar, she tilted her head. Then she nodded. Esther. That night, after she'd fallen into a restless sleep again, Edgar sat by the hearth, staring at the old trunk in the corner. It hadn't been opened in 2 winters, not since Maria died. Dust coated its lid, and the leather straps were stiff with age. Still, he walked over, knelt and unbuckled it. Inside, folded neatly, were Maria's things. A red wool dress, a knitted shawl, a lavender sachet long since faded but still clinging to some ghost of scent. He brought the dress to his face. The fabric was soft, warmer than he remembered. His throat tightened. I'm sorry, Maria, he whispered, but she needs it more than memory does. The next morning, he laid the dress on the edge of the bed. When the girl awoke, she stared at it like it was something sacred. Edgar gestured, then turned away to give her privacy. Later, when she stepped out in the red wool dress, it hung loose on her frame, but it fit well enough. Her dark hair framed her face in soft waves. There was something dignified about her now, something she had reclaimed. Edgar made tea from dried willow bark and honey. He offered it in silence. She took it. Outside, the wind had died. Inside, something delicate was taking root. By evening, she sat beside the fire, watching the flames like they might whisper answers. Edgar broke the quiet. You've got no reason to trust me. But whoever Kuruk is, he paused. He's not getting you back. She looked at him sharply. Fear flickered in her eyes. No, take me back, she said slowly, voice trembling. Edgar leaned in. No one's taking you anywhere. She shivered, but not from cold. He reached out, slowly, and placed a hand on his chest. You're safe. You're free. I'll die before I let them take you. For a moment she stared at him, unblinking, searching. Then, slowly, she nodded, and for the first time the tight lines around her eyes began to ease. Days passed like slow-moving clouds. The snow outside softened, but the cold remained, locking the cabin in a quiet stillness. Inside, life had begun to shift. Tyanita. She had whispered the name one morning, barely audible, moved through the space like a ghost, relearning her body. She still spoke little, but her eyes no longer darted at every sound. She helped gather kindling from the pile, stirred stew with practiced hands, and once even smiled faintly when Edgar burned his fingers trying to light the stove. Tyanita, Edgar repeated her name softly by the fire that evening. That's strong. What does it mean? She looked at him from across the hearth, then said slowly, Dancing flower. He blinked, not expecting that. Well, he said with a smile, seems gentle for someone who nearly took down 3 bounty hunters with a stare. She gave a small, silent laugh. That night, as the wind whistled low against the eaves, Edgar pulled a worn, leather-bound book from the shelf. It was Maria's. She used to read from it aloud, an old missionary's journal detailing his time among the Apache and other tribes of the Southwest. The spine cracked as he opened it. He slid it across the floor to Tyanita. She hesitated, then picked it up. Her fingers traced the faded gold lettering on the cover, then opened it carefully. The pages smelled of smoke and lavender. When she came to a hand-drawn symbol, a circle surrounded by feathers, she froze. She pointed. This, she whispered. Edgar leaned forward. You know it? Tyanita nodded. My family, Bear Clan. My father, she paused, searching for the word, healer, curandero. A medicine man? Edgar asked gently. Yes. She turned another page, a ceremonial blanket. Another, a drawing of an initiation rite, woven patterns, a girl standing alone at dawn. My day, she said, tapping the page. When I become woman. He nodded, watching her. She was remembering who she was, stitch by stitch. Later, wrapped in her manta, she sat staring into the fire. He's me, she said suddenly. Kuruk, big warrior, kill many. Want. Alliance, ask father for me. Edgar sat still, letting the silence stretch. My father say yes, for peace, for clan. But you ran, Edgar said quietly. Tyanita nodded. 3 days before. I hear him. Talk with others. Say he will. Tame me. Her voice trembled. Break me. She clutched the blanket tighter. I try escape. They find me. Tie hands. Say they wait until day. She paused, then said, Storm came. Horse scare. I fall. Down ravine. Edgar felt his gut twist. They thought you were dead. She nodded. I walk. Long time. Then no more. Then you. He leaned back, letting it all settle. They'll come, he said after a moment. Kuruk, or someone he sends. When they find out you're alive. Tyanita didn't flinch. She looked into the fire as though she'd known it all along. Edgar stared at the flames too, then asked, Are you ready to fight for your freedom? She looked at him, eyes dark, steady, and she nodded once. Yes. He stood slowly, went to the door, and opened it to the night. The storm had passed. The stars were sharp and cold above the trees. He turned back to her. Then we leave at first light. Snow had softened to a silence that felt alive. The pines drooped under its weight, and the cabin stood like a lone sentinel, dark against the pale world. Inside, the fire whispered, guarding the sanctuary they had built from cold, from fear, from everything they had left behind. It was past midnight when Edgar heard the sound. Hooves. Muffled. Careful. He moved slowly from the hearth, rifle within reach. At the window, he saw them. 3 riders, wrapped in dust-colored coats, snow clinging to their hats. One of them knocked. Hard. Edgar opened the door just a crack. Evening. Looking for a runaway redskin, the leader said. $500. Word is, she passed this way. You heard wrong, Edgar replied evenly. Ain't nothing here but smoke and silence. Another man squinted toward the corral. That blanket on your horse, Red River pattern. Edgar didn't miss a beat. Traded it years ago. I liked the colors. The third man leaned forward. You got any women in there? Edgar's voice was flat. Only ghosts. A beat of silence passed. Then the leader said, We'll be around. They turned and rode off into the dark. Edgar shut the door, bolted it, leaned against the wood. His chest rose and fell like a storm-split sea. He waited, listened, then crept back to the window. No sign of them. He turned. Tyanita sat at the hearth, motionless, wrapped in her manta like a warrior's shroud. The firelight flickered across her face, carving strength into her features. "They're gone," he said softly. She looked up, her eyes fierce but calm. "You could have run," he whispered. "You stay too," she answered. They didn't speak after that. Just sat, side by side, listening to the fire breathe. Then, hoofbeats. They were back. Edgar stood, revolver in hand. Tyanita rose beside him, tightening the mantle around her shoulders. Her face was carved from silence. The leader's voice called from outside, low and mocking. "We know she's in there. Bring her out." Tyanita stepped forward. Her voice rose, not in English but in Apache. Low at first, then rising like thunder. She began to chant. Ancient words. Words that bent the air. "You bring death on your heads," she shouted. "This land is sacred. This fire is protected. Spirits will claim your bones." The wind shifted. The men outside paused. Their horses snorted. One backed away. Inside, Edgar stood frozen, not in fear, but in awe. Tyanita didn't just speak, she summoned. She commanded. Her voice was storm and stone, her eyes lit with firelight, unblinking. One of the bounty hunters reached for his weapon. Tyanita stepped closer to the door, arms outstretched. "Leave this place, or be buried by it." The fire cracked. Shadows danced. Then they turned. Without another word, the men mounted and rode away, fast, careless, desperate to be gone. When silence returned, it was deeper than before. Tyanita collapsed to her knees. Edgar rushed to her side. "You did it," he said, breathless. "You scared them off." She looked at him with wide eyes, still trembling. "I needed to protect home." He placed a hand on her shoulder. "You did." They knelt there, forehead to forehead, fire between them, heart beside heart. "You didn't run," he said quietly. "They would take me. You could have still run, but you didn't." She closed her eyes. "You stayed too." He touched her face, brushed away a tear she hadn't known was falling. "I'm staying too," he whispered. Outside, the snow kept falling. Inside, they faced the storm, together. The dawn broke cold and bitter. Smoke still drifted from the cabin's chimney as Edgar packed the final satchel, cinching it with rawhide and snow-numbed fingers. The decision had been made in silence, the kind of decision that does not need saying. They could not stay. The bounty hunters would return, or worse, word would spread. Kuruk's men would come eventually, and Edgar knew that while the mountains might hide them for a time, they would not protect them forever. Tyanita helped where she could, loading food into saddlebags, rolling blankets. She had braided her hair tightly, fastened her mantle-like armor. There was something in her eyes that had not been there before. Resolve. They rode south at first, keeping close to the river before veering west into the deep pine forest, away from the main trails. The snow crunched beneath hooves, and branches scratched at their sleeves. Smoky carried the heavier load. Tyanita's horse, a chestnut mare Edgar had once broken himself, moved cautiously, responding to Edgar's voice as he guided Tyanita from the front. "You ever ridden before?" he called back. She shook her head. "Only once, not far, not like this." "Well," he said, giving her reins a little slack, "then we teach as we go." They moved carefully through a rocky pass. Deer tracks crossed their path. Tyanita signaled with her hand, 2 fingers bent slightly. "Doe," she whispered. 2 days passed. Edgar looked down at the faint impressions. "That's how you tell?" She nodded. "Spacing, angle, snowmelt." "Damn," he said with quiet admiration. "You see the world different than I do." "You ride like wind," she said. He laughed. "Took years. Horses taught me more than most men ever did." They camped that night beneath a ridge of black stone, the wind funneled low like a whispering voice. Edgar made a small fire, shielded by rocks. He roasted salted meat and shared dried apples from a jar he had packed in a hurry. Tyanita stared at the flames for a long time before speaking. "I never knew my mother." Edgar looked up. "She died when I was a child. Not in sickness, not in childbirth." She paused, swallowing. "Kiruk. He came to our village before, said he wanted alliance. My father refused." She looked away. The next week, she was found by the river, face broken. Edgar's hands clenched. He murdered her. Tyanita nodded slowly. But no proof, no war, only silence. Jesus, Edgar muttered. How does a man like that walk free? Because he makes others fear more than they love, she said softly. They didn't speak again that night. The next day, she rode better, stronger in the saddle. Edgar watched her learn, her shoulders straightening, her body trusting the animal beneath her. He taught her how to adjust stirrups, how to lean into turns, how to hold tight with her knees during descent. She taught him how to read the land, not just tracks, but shifts in light, the behavior of birds, where the wind carried sound. They moved through the wilderness as one. On the third night, they camped beneath the stars near a frozen creek, flames dancing in a shallow pit. Edgar laid out a rabbit they had snared together. Snowflakes melted on his coat as he leaned against a boulder, watching her sip tea. You know, he said quietly, Maria, my wife, she used to say the land never forgets, that it remembers every footstep, every wound. Tyanita looked up. She was kind, he said. Sharp, too. She'd have liked you. What happened to her? Tyanita asked. He stared into the fire. Renegades. White mostly, some drunk, some worse. They came in the night, torched our house. I fought, but I was too slow. She died saving our dog. Tyanita did not speak. She reached over and gently placed her hand over his. He met her eyes. I thought I buried my heart with her, he said. They sat in silence. Then, slowly, Edgar took her hand in both of his. Snow fell quietly around them, the world shrinking to fire and skin and breath. You're not someone I saved, he said. You're someone I need beside me. Will you let me? Her breath caught. The wind shifted. Tyanita looked down at their hands, then back up at him. Yes, she whispered. The fire cracked. The stars listened. And two hearts, long frozen by loss, began to thaw in each other's warmth. The path curved upward, into a narrow pass where the wind cut through the rocks like a blade. Pines stood in silent rows, branches coated in hoarfrost, the sky above paling from blue to the color of bone. Edgar rode ahead, guiding the horses up the incline while Tyanita scanned the trail behind them. That was when they saw him, a lone figure standing in the clearing ahead, unmoving, tall, cloaked in fur, his face painted with ash-gray lines. He held no weapon in hand, but he wore the presence of a man who did not need one. Edgar reached for his revolver instinctively. Don't, Tyanita said, pulling up beside him. You know him? She squinted, then nodded slowly. Nakai, my cousin. She dismounted before Edgar could stop her and walked forward with measured steps. Nakai did not move, did not blink, until she stood within 3 feet of him. They spoke in Apache, low, sharp, heavy with memory. Edgar watched, tense. Finally she turned back, her expression unreadable. He says my father is dying, she said. He calls me home to break the curse. What curse? Edgar asked. She looked at Nakai, then back to Edgar. They believe my flight dishonored the clan, that unless I return, war will follow. Kuruk. Tyanita nodded. He tells the elders I betrayed peace, that I fled duty. He says without me there can be no alliance. He stirs fear. Edgar stepped down from his horse, jaw tight. So what, they expect you to go back? To him? Nakai took a step forward. She must face the circle, speak before the fire, let the spirits decide. Edgar stared at him. And what does Kuruk think of that? Nakai's eyes narrowed. He wants blood. Yours, hers, anyone who stands in the way. He'll make war, Tyanita said, her voice quiet. Not just with us, with other clans, with settlers. He'll burn everything. Silence pressed down like snow. Nakai stepped closer, speaking directly to Edgar now. You do not understand our law. If she returns willingly, she may challenge him. If she does not, she becomes the excuse he needs. Edgar's hands curled into fists. She's no man's property. Nakai stared, impassive. If she wants to fight, Edgar continued, voice rising, I'll fight with her. But no one, no chief, no cousin, no ghost, is dragging her back. Tayanita looked at him, her breath trembling. I don't want to go back to him, she whispered. But I can't run forever. If I run, people die. My people. Edgar met her eyes. Then we don't. She inhaled deeply, then turned to Nakai. Her voice steadied. I will come, not to kneel, but to speak. Nakai gave a slow nod. Then prepare. The mountain waits. That night their campfire burned low in a stone hollow. The trees rustled with messages. Neither of them could hear, but both could feel. Tayanita sat cross-legged, painting lines of red ochre on her arms, symbols of the Bear clan. Edgar watched her, then took out his whetstone and began sharpening his knife. Neither spoke of fear, only duty. I thought we were almost free, Edgar murmured. We are, she replied. Even if I die, I choose it. He looked up at her. You're not dying. You're standing, and I'm standing with you. Tayanita met his gaze, then reached across the fire. He took her hand. The stars above them blinked through the trees. And somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled, the same one that had followed them for days, now sounding closer, as if bearing witness. They did not sleep much, but they did not sleep apart. Morning would bring judgment. But tonight, they were still free. The trail to the tribal lands wound through stone and silence. Pines grew denser, taller, as if guarding the sacred valley ahead. Frost clung to the branches like forgotten prayers. They traveled in the shadow of the sacred mountain, 3 riders bound by blood, memory, and something not yet named. Edgar rode slightly behind, his eyes always scanning the flanks. Tayanita led with confidence, her spine straight, her breath steady. Nakai brought up the rear, silent as smoke, but always watching. Each night they made camp beneath the stars, their fires small, their voices low, and each morning, before breaking camp, Tayanita and Edgar trained. She practiced with the hunting knife Nakai had given her. Quick slashes at saplings, clean throws at notched logs. Her movements were fluid, her breath even. She moved like someone who had already imagined herself dead and chosen to live instead. You aim with the heart first, she said, as Edgar helped her refine her grip. Then the blade listens. He grinned. I'll remember that. In return, he placed a revolver in her palm. Now you learn my language. She looked at it with suspicion. I do not like the noise. Neither do I, Edgar said. But sometimes, noise is the only thing men understand. He guided her fingers gently over the grip, showed her how to brace against the kick, how to breathe just before the shot. Her first try sent the bullet wide, but the second nicked bark. By the third morning, she split a pine cone from 10 paces. You're a fast learner, he said. She didn't answer, just reloaded. That afternoon, Nakai approached Edgar while Tayanita bathed in the river. He stood without hostility, but there was tension in his stance. You love her, he said, not as a question. Edgar didn't hesitate. Yes. Nakai's brow furrowed. You are not of her people. I know. You are not her future. Maybe not, Edgar said, voice calm. But I am her present, and I would die for her. Nakai studied him for a long time, then nodded slowly. Then live for her first. That night, while Tayanita slept beside the fire, wrapped in her manta, Edgar sat apart with his revolver in his lap. He pulled out a small carving blade, one Maria had once used on buttons, and began etching letters into the wooden grip. He worked slowly, carefully, every stroke deliberate. Tayanita? When he finished, he ran his thumb over the letters, then whispered to the flames. This gun fires only for her. Nakai saw it the next morning. He said nothing, but his eyes lingered on Edgar's hands longer than before. They reached the edge of the sacred valley on the 6th day. A ring of standing stones marked the threshold. Beyond it, smoke curled from fires. Children's laughter echoed through the trees. The tribe had gathered. The drummers began to beat, slow, steady rhythms. Tayanita dismounted and turned to Edgar. I go ahead, alone. He started to protest, but she held up a hand. "If I do not stand on my own feet, I cannot stand at all." He nodded once, swallowing the words he wanted to say. She stepped forward, past the stones, into the arms of a waiting elder. Murmurs rippled through the gathered crowd. Faces turned. Some recognized her. Others stared, as if seeing a ghost. Edgar stayed behind with Nakai, watching her shrink into the crowd. "She walks into the fire," Nakai murmured. "And I'll walk in after her," Edgar said. Nakai didn't smile, but he didn't disagree. That night, as drums echoed into the mountains, Edgar sat by the edge of camp, his hand resting on the gun bearing her name. His body was ready for war, but his heart was waiting for her return. The council fire was lit just after sunset. At the center of the tribal circle, flames rose tall and alive, casting flickering shadows across painted faces and worn ceremonial robes. Elders sat in silence on carved stones. Warriors lined the edges, hands resting on knives, tomahawks, and bows. The entire valley seemed to hold its breath. Tyanita stepped into the ring alone. She wore no war paint, no armor, only her manta, fastened tightly across her shoulders, and the knife at her belt. Her hair was braided with feathers of mourning and defiance. Her face was steady. Kuruk was already waiting, massive, shirtless despite the cold, his chest marked with scars both earned and taken. He sneered at her as she approached. "The lost bride returns," he said, loud enough for all to hear. "Will you finally kneel and beg forgiveness?" Tyanita didn't blink. "No, I came to speak the truth." A hush fell over the circle. "My name is Tyanita, daughter of Ahot, Bear Clan. I was promised without my voice, but I am not silent. I did not run because I was afraid. I ran because I would rather face death in the snow than life in your chains." Kuruk laughed, slow and deep. "Chains? I offered you a place of honor. You offered me submission, after murdering my mother to punish my father." Gasps rippled through the elders. Tyanita turned, showing her wrists still faintly scarred. "I was tied, dragged, beaten. I escaped because the storm chose mercy, and I came back not to plead, but to expose." Kuruk stepped forward, fists clenched. "Lies from a frightened girl." "I am no girl," she said. "I am the blood of the bear, and I claim my right." One of the elders stood. "She invokes the fire circle." Kuruk smirked. "Then let her fight me." Before anyone could speak, a voice rose from the shadows. "She won't." All heads turned. Edgar stepped into the firelight. He looked smaller next to Kuruk, older, less adorned, but his revolver hung heavy on his hip, and the scar on his cheek glinted beneath firelight like steel. "I challenge in her place," he said. "By your laws, a warrior may name their second." Whispers surged. Some objected. Others nodded. Kuruk growled, "You are no Apache." "No," Edgar said calmly, "but I am her shield." The elders conferred. One spoke. "Accepted. At sunrise. To the blood." They gave them until morning. In the tent that night, Tyanita sat beside Edgar, her hands wrapped around his. "You don't have to do this." "I know," he said. "People will kill you. Maybe, but he won't take you." She cupped his face, tears shining in her eyes. "I would rather lose a war than lose you." He kissed her brow. "Then let's win both." Dawn came with crimson light. The ring was formed again, this time smaller, tighter. Warriors lined the boundary. The ground had been cleared. At the center, two men, one for conquest, one for love. Kuruk lunged first, brutal, fast. Edgar dodged, but the Apache's blade caught his shoulder, tearing through cloth and flesh. He staggered, blood soaking his side. "Tired already, white man?" Kuruk snarled. Edgar said nothing. He breathed. Watched. Waited. Kuruk came again, swinging wide. Edgar ducked low, kicked out, sent the warrior stumbling. Then he struck, knife slashing Kuruk's thigh. The crowd gasped. But Kuruk recovered fast. Howling, he tackled Edgar, pinned him. Hands at his throat. Tyanita screamed. Edgar's vision dimmed. Then he remembered. The river bluff, the rock ledge. He twisted, grabbed a handful of earth and ash from the fire ring, and flung it into Kuruk's eyes. The warrior roared, blinded. Edgar rolled free, drove his elbow into Kuruk's gut, then, with his last strength, slammed the hilt of his blade against Kuruk's temple. The man fell. Silence. Then the voice of an elder. "It is done." Kuruk stirred but did not rise. "The Bear clan is not yours," the elder declared. "You are exiled." Two warriors hauled Kuruk away. His eyes met Tyanita's one last time. Wild, defeated. She didn't look away. Edgar collapsed to his knees. Tyanita ran to him. Blood soaked his shirt. His breath was shallow. She knelt and pressed her forehead to his. "I love you," she whispered, in Apache. Then, slowly, she took his hand and placed it on her heart. "If you still live tomorrow," she said, "will you marry me?" Edgar coughed a laugh. "I never needed a priest," he rasped. "I already know who I belong to." She smiled through tears. They carried him gently, treated his wounds, and the tribe sang the old songs that night, not of war, but of victory. Weeks passed. Spring came late that year, but it came. On a patch of land beside the river, Edgar built a cabin with his own hands. Tyanita wove new patterns into their blanket. The first bird sang in the birch tree as snow melted. One morning, Edgar sat by the window, writing in a leather-bound journal. He paused, smiled, and wrote, "I went looking for a horse in the snow. I found a warrior, and she saved me more than I ever saved her." Then he closed the book, stood, and kissed his wife. In a land where vengeance once ruled and silence meant survival, a widowed cowboy and a warrior woman rewrote fate with courage, love, and the fire of their own choosing. Edgar Bellamy didn't just protect Tyanita, he stood beside her as she reclaimed her voice, her name, and her people. And in return, she gave him something he thought was lost forever, a reason to live again. If this story moved you, if it stirred something wild, something true, subscribe to Wild West Love Stories. Here, we tell tales not just of guns and dust, but of hearts that beat louder than war drums. Of love that dares to stand against the storm. Hit that bell icon so you never miss a ride into the past, where love was lawless, fierce, and unforgettable. We'll see you on the next trail.